Mic check 1 2 1 2. It's the Y2K Collector. We have made it to Friday, and I am excited to say that I picked up a cool $10 copy of Ninja Gaiden for the NES. This label is immaculate, so always good when you can get a pretty nice label. The back isn't as pretty. Unfortunately, I don't know what's on the back of this, but the person who sold me the game did give me a good deal, and it seems like it is a reseller who typically gets pretty good ratings and pretty good reviews. And that's what leads me to today's video. I want to give my honest and final thoughts on resellers. Now, someone had asked me to give my thoughts on resellers a couple weeks ago to be exact, and I hadn't had a chance to get around to it, but I wanted to talk about it now because of the recent purchase that I made. Now, I think that you can clump most resellers into two categories. You have business-minded resellers, and you have desperate resellers. And to me, a desperate reseller is a person who becomes so overwhelmed at the prospect of getting an undervalued game that they get sweaty palms, they get nervous, their hands start shaking, they lose all sense of morale. They lie, they deceive, they omit information that they know someone that they're doing dealings with might want to know. They really have nothing else going on. They have no real sense of how to run a business, how to do business, or how to build relationships. And for them, it's purely about getting the game by any means necessary. So they burn people. They don't focus on the networking aspect of things. It's purely about the bottom line, how much they can say they got a expensive game for. And to me, that's a desperate reseller. And I think if you've been in the hobby of collecting video games long enough, you're able to spot those folks a mile away, because they reek of desperation. And you know exactly who I'm talking about. You see them at your yard sales, you see them at your thrift stores, you see them at your game stores, you see them when you go to retro gaming conventions. You can spot a desperate reseller a mile away just by their demeanor and how they engage with you. So that's that bucket. And I could go on and elaborate more about the traits that, of a desperate reseller, but those are some high level aspects of a desperate reseller, in my opinion. Then you have the business-minded, sound-minded reseller. And I think that is a person, because you got to remember, the key word here is business, right? So with that person, they value relationships. They build bridges. They're more willing to give out deals, whether it be to customers or to fellow resellers, because they understand the importance of fostering healthy relationships. They play fair. They're upfront. They're transparent. They keep it real. They are not swayed. They don't work off of emotion. They typically work off of what makes the most dollars, basically what makes sense, both literally and figuratively. What makes the most sense. And I think a business-minded reseller are the people that are running your local video game stores, They're the ones that are doing fair deals at retro game conventions. They're the ones who will step to the side and give you the opportunity to also look at games at a yard sale. They won't dogpile games at a flea market, and they're fair. Their life and all of their hopes and dreams aren't built on scoring one expensive game. And usually they have other things going on in life outside of just buying and selling video games. Now, unfortunately, we don't see or hear a lot, and you don't really hear a lot of people talk as much about the good resellers these days as you hear about the bad resellers. And that's because some of the most popular resellers, no matter how much they try to frame themselves as savvy entrepreneurs or business people, they've already been marred with the label of reseller. And they've already been marred with some of the negative connotations that come with being a desperate reseller, even if they're not, right? So you have your Retro Ricks, you have your Phoenix resales, you have your chase after the right price guys. And that would probably be the big three, at least in the YouTube space, right? In the YouTube space, those guys would probably be the big three. And I call them the big three because they've gone from doing deals in parking lots to creating different avenues of infrastructure, right? So Retro Rick just went all out and bought a game store and has a full-fledged game store. Now, just because he owns a game store doesn't mean he's not a reseller. He's still a reseller. He just resells out of his own game store. Phoenix Resale. He went from doing, picking up stuff and selling stuff out of his car and whatever, to creating an infrastructure in the basement of his home to where now he has his own app. Chase after the right price. He's somehow built an employee base, right? He has a whole team working with him. And he's set up an online network. He's networked through eBay and whatnot, and he uses pretty much his relationships, his friendships, and just his overall knowledge of the collecting market to grow his business. And he doesn't just stop at video games. He's baseball cards, whatever. He's probably gonna flip whatever you can give him to flip. He'll flip it. And most importantly, each of these gentlemen understand the power of YouTube, and they've all leveraged it to help exponentially grow their business. Because not only does YouTube help fund their business, like they're getting actually paid off of their YouTube channels, that YouTube money can then be, or at least some of it can then be used to either pay employees or buy more video games, get inventory, maybe pay for travel to some of the game conventions. They're able to, they've done a really good job of leveraging what they have and making the most of it. Now, some might say that they possess a lot of the character traits of what we would consider a desperate reseller. And you know what? Maybe at some point they did. But at this stage of the game, I think that they've migrated to a different point of reselling. And even though they may have done that, the negative connotation, I think, for a lot of people still sticks with them. Now, I think for the general public, they love those guys. That's why they're so big. That's why they're so popular, because they've been able to successfully migrate away from some of those, I guess, characteristics that make them, or would have made them look like desperate resellers. Now, you have people out there who sell things, they resell games, but they're not resellers. They buy games in bulk and then sell what they don't want to help maintain the hobby. But I don't think we classify those folks as desperate resellers because of how they do it and how they showcase it. I'll give you a couple examples. Gamer's Manual. This is a guy who's so chill and he's so cool, and all he really just shows you is the deal. You know, he never shows you his actual negotiations. He just shows you what he picked up. He's like, hey, this is what I picked up today. I picked up this later. So you don't really know if he's a scummy reseller or not, because he kind of lets you know what he paid for some of his items. He doesn't tell you show you what the negotiation process was. And most importantly, he's not really going to tell you, you don't really know what he sells some of these things for. So, you know, you really don't know. You're just able to see, you know, what he gets for it. And even me, the Y2K collector, I've bought and sold things plenty of times. But what you've seen on my channel in terms of what I've allowed you to see me sell, usually you see me trade stuff in. I'm usually selling some Switch games and stuff to be able to add more retro games. So, where am I going with all this? I think that resellers reselling video games, you're going to resell video games based on who you are as a person and what your personality is. If you're just desperate, you're going to do desperate things. You're going to be a desperate reseller. If you're a liar, you're going to lie while you resell video games. If you're a scammer and a cheater, you're going to be a scamming, cheating reseller. If you're an honest person, you're going to be an honest reseller. If you're a fair person, you're going to be a fair reseller. It's just natural, right? People are going to be who they're going to be, no matter what they're doing. If they're reselling video games, if they're reselling sneakers. And I think there are times where we have to stop looking at the action and look at the actor, right? The act of reselling video games is not bad. In fact, if it weren't for resellers, half of you probably wouldn't have half the games that you have in your collection today. In a sense, thank God for resellers. Thank God there are people who are out there willing to sell some of these games that are hard to get to, because if not, you would never have them, right? So the hobby does need resellers, but what the hobby does not need are folks who are going to lie, cheat, and steal their way into making deals. And I think that falls more so on the individual than it does on the act of selling a video game or reselling a video game. It's all about how you do things. So I don't hate resellers. I don't hate all resellers, and I don't love all resellers. I look at people for who they are outside of the reselling, and I judge them based on the actions they take while reselling. And hopefully that answers your question as to how I view those who engage in reselling. And hopefully all of your experiences, if you're someone who's been jaded by a reseller, hopefully you're not so jaded that you can't look past the action and see the person for who they are, right? It's Friday. We're one day away from being able to do some game hunting. And if you go out and you do some game hunting, odds are you're going to buy from a reseller. Unless you're going to GameStop. Unless you are going to GameStop, Goodwill, GameStop or Goodwill, you're buying from a reseller. If you're going to a retro game store, that guy's reselling you a game someone else had. No matter what you do, no matter how you try to cut it, that's where you're going to fall. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Am I completely off on this? Is all reselling bad, or should we start judging people individually for who they are? I'm interested to know your thoughts. It's the Y2K Collector. I'll see you tomorrow.